Hello, welcome. This is the Just Bloody Post-it podcast for people who want to share their shizzle brilliantly and boldly online, who'd like to hear how others push through the pain of putting themselves out there so they can start to make things happen. Because surely the thought of not doing the thing you want to do is worse than some mild public humiliation. I'm Helen Perry, and you can usually find me putting it all out there on Instagram. That platform powers my small business. I run workshops and courses that share what I've learned about successful Instagramming. And if you've ever been to one, it's very likely I'll have mentioned my next guest. I'm a bit of a fan of what she does on Instagram.
You can't have no accountability to the people who follow you at all and still reap the rewards. Not to go all Spider-Man, but with power and with influence comes responsibility.
In spring 2019, Clare Seal was £27,000 in debt, and after years of stress and sleepless nights had hit breaking point in her relationship with money. In her words, she had a really awful day. She decided things were going to change, and she opened her then anonymous Instagram account, My Frugal Year, to document her journey into financial well-being. It was searingly honest and different, as well as being truly helpful. Claire's always shared what she's learning about good practice, her rights, and how to develop a properly changed relationship with cash. Immediately, it attracted lots of attention, and in the 2 years since it launched, Claire's gained more than 75,000 followers on Instagram. A column in Glamour magazine, has published 2 books, and founded the Financial Wellbeing Forum, a platform for honest, judgment-free chat about personal finance. And she's making great money. Everything's fantastic, except nothing's ever totally fantastic, is it? We chatted about some of the costs of being so publicly vulnerable, about judgment and negativity online, and about how to do Insta-influencing well. But first, we dived into a bit of a rabbit hole about emails and time management. Hello, Claire, and welcome.
Hi, Helen.
Just to kind of do the whole pinch me thing, it's just a couple of years since you launched the Insta account, My Frugal Year. I mean, you've come such a long way. As my intro indicated, what does your average working day look like now? Is there such a thing as such a multi-hyphenate?
I try to arrange my day according to how much energy I have. So I'm always quite buzzing in the morning. And then by mid-afternoon, I am usually in a bit of an energy slump. So Penny Windsor actually recommended to me that is the time that I should do all of my admin. And she's so right. Like, just
oh my
doing
goodness, because I fall off a cliff there as well. I start the day full of beans, and then it wanes.
Yeah. And I actually read something from Anna Quadrado a couple of weeks ago in her brilliant newsletter about how she does emails, and she works on like a 2 checks 1 reply system. So she checks them at 9, then she checks them again after lunch, and then she does like a bulk reply at 4 o'clock before she stops work, which I haven't quite got there because I always feel like everything's far more urgent than it actually is. But I think that's what I'd like to work towards.
Oh my goodness, I could really go deep into this with you, because running, I think, like, as a business grows quickly and you're running on your own, the messaging that's coming in from all different directions is just incredibly hard to keep on top of. But actually, email's pretty important in terms of, like, you know, knowing what's in there and have I replied to it. But I don't have a good system for it yet.
Yeah, my system's not ideal, but I do have a VA who's brilliant now for the last like couple of weeks, and it's already life-changing. But yeah, and then Wednesday and Thursday I have my toddler. Well, he's nearly 3 and he's enormous, so he's not really a toddler anymore, but he's around. So those days sort of consist of me like frantically trying to sort of have a balance between him not destroying the house and giving him enough attention and making sure that I'm responding to anything urgent. So those days are always fun.
I've got one of your auto replies on those days, actually, on your email, though, like while we're on the topic of emails, and you say to people, I'm with my toddler today and I can kind of respond to my emails, but you know what, it might not be instant. It's just a really good way of setting expectations, I thought.
Yeah, and I do try and do that. But I'm about to try and take 2 weeks off, Helen, and wow. I'm terrified. I feel like I need to prove to myself that I can take time away from my business. I feel like that's important, but also I'm not quite sure that I'm going to get it right. So
I think it has to be a goal looking forward, doesn't it? Sustainably, to have something that you can run for many years, that you need to find a way to take the kind of leave that you would take from an ordinary job.
Absolutely. It's been so intense for the last year, and I've been working evenings and weekends to try and like make it work around when the children haven't been able to be in school or childcare. And my husband's been brilliant as well. But yeah, I think sometimes when you hit a bit of a wall, like you're not going to do your best work unless you take a bit of a break. So I'm trying to like enforce that.
Perspective is so super important, actually, that, you know, there's work that happens when you're not consciously working as well, when you can take a step back. Anyway, for those who didn't come for the kind of female founder chat, taking it back, Claire, when you started your account, which was only just 2 years ago, you were £27,000 in personal debt. I think I'm right. And my frugal year was going to journal your efforts to change that. And I'm just interested to know what the catalyst was for you to say, enough, I'm going to change this, and I'm going to open an Instagram account and share it with Instagram what I'm going to do. What was there a clear turning point for you?
Oh yeah, definitely. And this is kind of, you know, a story that I've told a lot of times, and I still sometimes get like a bit of a lump in my throat, because it was a really, really awful day. And I think quite a lot of people's like journeys or you know, processes towards a better, you know, better life or better situation start with that terrible day. It was the middle of March, I think it was the 14th. And I was in an unarranged overdraft, which is the bad one. That's the one where you used to be charged a daily fee. They've changed it slightly now so that you're just charged kind of a ridiculous interest rate on your whole overdraft. And the bank called me, and I was sort of like waiting for this phone call that I knew was coming from the bank. She asked me when I was going to be able to sort of sort it out, and I said, well, it's going to be the end of the month when I get paid. And she asked me why, and it was the first time anyone had ever like asked me that on kind of a phone, you know, one of those scary phone calls with the bank. And I just heard myself say, there's just no money left. What sort of happened next was that she was really nice to me, and she like arranged for some fees to be refunded, which took me just about back within my limit, which meant I wasn't then incurring more fees, which I think is a cycle that lots of people get into. It makes it very, very difficult, you know, and it's definitely something I think that needs to change in the banking system. But yeah, and so I came off that phone call, feeling like, you know, something really, really desperately needed to change. But B, feeling like for the first time in a long time, like actually maybe I could change something and make things better. And so I don't even know what that woman's name was on the phone, but she probably changed my life. It all came like crashing down on me, and I sort of realised how much it had been affecting like my sleep and my mental health, my emotional health, my relationships. I was so stressed all the time. It was, you know, money was the last thing that I thought about before I went to sleep at night, the first thing that I thought about when I woke up in the morning. it was costing me so much more than just money to stay in that situation. I think I didn't really know what to do with that information. So for some reason I decided to put it on Instagram.
I was going to say this very like such a personal thing, so linked with shame and embarrassment, and you're like, I'm going public. Was it sort of an accountability thing, or did you realize it could help other people?
Oh no, I wasn't thinking about anyone else at that point, I'm afraid. I think it was partly accountability, and partly I just didn't know what else to do. I think it was like a bit of a sort of moment of madness almost. And I do wonder often why I chose that as the kind of vessel for it almost. There wasn't anything particularly brave about it either. Like, I was anonymous for the first year of the account, and that's something that I forget about sometimes, you know, because I was so ashamed. And there's loads of shame around like debt and financial difficulty, but it's very much matched by judgment from the outside as well. So, you know, I was really worried that people were going to judge me. I didn't, you know, a lot of my friends and family didn't know about it, so I didn't want them to know. But yeah, I really just thought that maybe a couple of dozen people might follow me and shout at me if I spent too much money. I definitely didn't expect it to grow into what it then became, because I think when you're in a situation like that, you feel like you're the only person in the world, and I really felt very isolated in it. I thought I was completely alone. I thought I was the single worst person with money in the world, and it wasn't until I started the account and it started to gain traction, and then particularly after I wrote a list for Climmy Telford's blog, was really when lots more people started sort of coming over, and they were following, but they were also like sending me messages with their own story of, you know, either from the past or in the present, of like their struggles in their relationship with money. And that's when it sort of clicked that this is far more common than anyone ever thinks it is. And we're just not talking about it, and everyone is left to suffer alone because they feel like it's their fault and they have to pay penance for having made mistakes with money. And, you know, I just thought, like, bollocks to that, basically.
It was so quick that people did start to come on that journey with you, and no surprise to anybody listening that what you just described was relatable to just thousands of other people. I discovered your account when you wrote the list for Clemmy as well. I think that was not very long after you launched it. And I think ever since then, in kind of every workshop I've done or training session, virtually bar none, I've mentioned your account because it just represents everything I would hope that people are aiming for when they are sharing on social media, because it's just so packed with value. Claire, you share all your learnings, your fresh conversations. Was it always obvious to you what kind of content you wanted to create?
I think in the beginning it was almost like a diary. Like, I wasn't really writing it as though anyone was going to read it. And I think that's how a lot of people start out. Like, I've definitely, I'm a big fan of Sarah Turner, who's the Mumsy Mum, obviously. And I often go back and read the piece that she wrote about starting the blog, and the fact that, you know, actually usually it was only, there were like 5 views and they were all her.
I do often wonder how many of my views are me.
But that there wasn't, she was just writing it for her. And like, again, you know, back when Sarah started out, that nobody was sharing that view of motherhood, but everyone was feeling it. And I think, you know, I was just writing almost as though I was writing to myself. But then as time went on, I obviously, after you kind of reach a certain point and you have a certain number of people following you. I always think that if you're getting something out of your account, like I do, you know, I get the accountability. I also, you know, have turned it into part of my career now. If you're getting something out of it, you absolutely must make sure that it's symbiotic and that you're offering as much as you're taking from it. And I don't really buy into the fact that, you know, I've seen quite often recently people sharing the fact that like your Instagram is, or your social media is like an extension of your house. It's fine to delete comments or block people if they've come into your house, but it isn't, is it? It's a public Instagram that potentially you are monetizing. So I think, you know, you can't really have it both ways. You can't have no accountability to the people who follow you at all and still reap the rewards. Not to go all Spider-Man, but with power and with influence comes responsibility. And I think, you know, I take that responsibility very seriously. So as my audience grew, I wanted to provide things that were of value, and I wanted to, you know, I felt like I owed honesty.
Yeah, I was going to say your honesty, there's so much value in your honesty, first and foremost. You know, your account is amazingly generous, but it's been a lot for you at times. And I think it's true for anybody who gives away a great deal on social media. You then invite criticism, people's thoughts and opinions. What form does that take for you in your account and your work, and how do you deal with it?
I mean, there are a few different ways that it sort of manifests, actually, that like any kind of antagonism. And I have to say, I'm very lucky. I don't get very much of it. One of the obvious ones is the kind of very, you know, people who have never struggled in their relationship with money sort of saying, well, it's as simple as what goes in versus what goes out. Like, you must be, I went on Times Radio last year to talk about this, or things around debt, and someone texted in to say, you have to be a selfish half-wit to get into any kind of debt. Unfortunately, that's an opinion that a lot of people hold, and like, they're wrong, but it's quite a popular opinion. So I get some of that.
It is certainly among a certain type of newspaper reader, I would say. If you ever delve into the comments, they think they're pretty freaking clever. A lot of those guys, don't they?
And I just wonder, like, if all of these days from Dorset might have a daughter who's like struggling terribly with money and terrified to tell her dad,
and can't tell her dad. Yeah,
you know, that's what always kind of like strikes me, I suppose. I mean, obviously, the being horrible about it is their fault. You know, having that attitude about money that's like a very societal thing. It's not necessarily just a few people who think that way. So that's one of them. And then increasingly recently, obviously, my material situation has improved a lot through like very hard work, I have to say, but also, you know, in the last 6 months, mainly because I have grown a profile and written 2 books and put the time in and made myself incredibly vulnerable. I now have very lucrative opportunities. So the last 6 months has seen a big increase in income for me. And so now increasingly I'm getting people who are trying to sort of catch me out. So people who are sort of maybe insinuating that I'm not honest about how much I earn, to which I will just respond, I'm just about to file my tax return. This is how much I've earned in the last year, because I just, you know.
Would you share that with your community?
I did.
You did?
Yeah. So I had posted. It always happens when I do an update post on how we're doing. So I'd posted something about how much we'd managed to pay off in the 2 years, which was just shy of 25 grand. We're very, very nearly at the end of that part of our sort of financial plan now. Someone had commented being like, well, you must be earning a lot more than the minimum wage or like national living wage to have paid that much off. So I just responded like, yes, when I first started the journey, I was earning 25 grand and my husband was earning 30. He has changed jobs and now has had a pay rise, and I went freelance and earned 60 grand in the last tax year. I pinned that comment because I felt like a lot of people might have been wondering that. And the last thing that I want anyone to do is look at my progress and ask themselves why they haven't managed it, when actually some of it is to do with having more income. I do think sometimes people ask those questions in quite a sort of malicious way to try and catch me out, and I'm just not having it.
I know, absolutely. It was almost insinuated that you shouldn't earn more than the national living wage, or that, you know, that, or you therefore you're less credible if you do. Do you know what I really liked about that, Claire, is like when you said because of my hard work and because of X, Y, and Z, I'm earning more money. It was almost like you nearly went into that and because I'm very lucky kind of thing that people tend to do when good things are happening for them, but you didn't. You're, you know, because I've written a book, because I have worked hard, and because I've run with what's happened and put the hours in, things have changed.
Well, I think I have to kind of frame it that way because, you know, I will freely acknowledge how lucky I've been, and I will freely acknowledge how privileged I am. I talk quite a lot about how we were broke, like we were really on the bones of our ass, but we were never poor. You know, we would always have had a safety net. We would have always had a roof over our heads, which just isn't the reality for a lot of people. You know, it's a bit of a catch-22 situation at the moment. Is kind of either I could lie about what my income is, and then, you know, people on the same journey but not the same trajectory would feel bad about their progress versus mine, or I could purposely turn down opportunities to keep myself at a lower income, or I could just do what I try and do and be honest about it and maybe rub a few people up the wrong way. But, you know, I try to be, also, you know, because some of the opportunities that I have are really lucrative, I try to match that with time that I give for free for you know, causes that I really believe in. So it's such a nuanced conversation, because I do also really remember sort of seeing people talking about how much they were earning on social media when things were really difficult for me, and it made me feel absolutely terrible. So I always want to try and strike a balance between making sure that I'm sort of serving the community that has supported me through the last couple of years, and also trying to, you know, use money as a tool to build myself the life that I want for me and my family as well. So it's tricky, but I think if your intention is good and you're always trying, then hopefully that comes across.
I think it really does. I think anybody that has or does follow you or follows you as a result of listening to this, and anybody that can hear you speak about it will appreciate how thoughtfully you're approaching all of it. Claire, when you started My Frugal Year, you did so anonymously, and then before your book came out, you came out yourself. How was that experience of posting your first picture of yourself on Instagram, talking to your family or friends who might not have known still at that point that it was actually you behind the account?
It was horrible.
Was it?
Yeah, it was really horrible. So, I mean, there were loads of great things about it, and people were so supportive, and, you know, I couldn't fault that. And, you know, Grazia were amazing.
You did a piece in Grazia. That was the big. Was that the big reveal, or was it on your Instagram account?
Yeah, and it was Anna Silverman who interviewed me and wrote the piece up, and she did a really like amazing job that I'm always really grateful that she made it something very positive rather than, as kind of publications sometimes want to do, like dwelling on the negative and the kind of sensational figures, which I also did deal with later on when the book came out as well. The response was overwhelmingly positive, but it was a horrible time for me. I felt so stripped raw. I felt like someone had taken all of my skin off.
Did people close to you still not know at that point that it was you that was running this account? Like, there was still some people that you had to tell right up until when that article appeared?
Yeah, there were still some people. I think by that point, like anybody who really mattered to me, I had spoken to about it, or you know, anyone who's going to be sort of directly affected. And I'd finished writing the book a long time before that, so I'd been speaking to people about that. Yeah, but I suppose it's that like second circle. So like all of the ex-colleagues, the people you went to university with, like all of the people who you aren't necessarily in touch with, you know, knowing all of that information about it, because I've been so honest and so like so open. Thousands of people reading your diary, but if they don't know that it's you, then it's all right. But the second that they put two and two together, you feel very vulnerable. But yeah, I had a huge vulnerability hangover for sort of a long time, and then last summer it just I've hit a real wall. I think that all of that time feeling so vulnerable, and the book being published in May and sort of having all of that like exposure, I just felt so overexposed and it was exhausted. In August, I just stopped functioning. Like it got to the point where the thought of having to like put a tea bag in a cup of tea and then put the water in and then get it out and then put milk in made me want to curl up in a ball and cry. I went to my GP, who was amazing, and she just said, like, it is no wonder you feel like this. You've given everything that you've got nothing left in the tank. Like we need to figure out how to get something back into your fuel tank. And so, you know, I started taking antidepressants, which really, really helped. And so
was that the first? Was that? Do you mind me asking if that was the first time that you had, or had you in the past?
No, I never had before. I'd never experienced that before. It was terrifying, actually. But yeah, and so I did that, and I took a bit of a break from social media for a couple of weeks in September, and just slowly started to rebuild things again. And I'd had to write a book. I'd had to write the journal during that time when I could barely like lift my head. And so that's something I'm really proud of now. Yeah, it was really difficult. It's obviously the pandemic sort of added to it, and I just felt completely broken by it all. And I think, you know, the last 6 months since then have involved me putting some really clear boundaries in place, growing a bit of a thicker skin, having like more courage in my conviction, and realizing that it's not the end of the world if someone puts a snarky comment on one of my posts or sends me like an abusive DM, that I don't have to address that or deal with it, you know, if it really is kind of horrible, as opposed to just challenging or questioning.
You're leading like this community that you've built, and you're giving them so much and so much of your emotional energy. Do you have a network in place that helps you now, that you know that you look to when you need support or guidance on this stuff?
I do. So I probably should utilise it a little bit more, but I do have people that I speak to quite frequently. I had a chat with Aja Barber recently, and she said, because one of the things when you have this big community and this big responsibility is you can get real paralysis around making decisions because you just don't know what's the best thing to do. And she was talking about the fact that she has an accountability buddy, which I think is brilliant. So like running those decisions by each other and kind of, you know, having the support in place to say no to things that aren't right as well. It's difficult. And I also spoke to my therapist about this, finally, sort of able to like afford to speak to a therapist every couple of weeks. Very, you know, again, a real privilege. But she was saying that, you know, in her work, there's a code that's there to kind of hold her and make her feel safe, that as long as she's operating within that code, she's doing a good job and she's not harming anyone. But that doesn't exist for people with arguably way more influence on way more people on social media. And I'm working on a advisory council to get something like that in place, because I think that is part of the reason why we see so many people with big followings either going down like a slightly a sort of path that doesn't maybe seem true to how they started their intentions,
because their situation has changed. And like you say, just having so many eyes on what you do changes the way you behave. The industry is just completely in its infancy, and there's the odd bit of regulation around like #ad, but as you say, there's just no guidance as to how to navigate people's expectations of you, how to create longevity and something with decent roots, and you know, that kind of thing.
And in that sense, I can completely understand why people panic and delete comments and block people the second that I think it makes you feel very fragile when you're so exposed and there are so many eyes on what you know, on what you're doing. But then that censoring, that's why websites like Tattle Life exist, you know, and so there's a real there's a real issue with you know, because accountability is really good for us. You know, a certain level of accountability is really, really good for us. If there isn't like a framework to hold us accountable, and then we're being held accountable by kind of individuals on our accounts, then that can feel like a really personal attack. And then, you know, it sort of turns into something that feels like bullying or trolling, even when sometimes it isn't. And then obviously there's a big subsection of websites like that are just utterly vile. So it's really difficult.
I think the industry would really benefit from you taking on that auntie role, Claire, and sorting this shit out. I feel that you're in the phase, correct me if I'm wrong, of turning your big Instagram community into a business, something for the long term for you and your family. And is that what the Financial Wellbeing Forum is about for you? Could you talk to us about it?
Yeah, I think with the Financial Wellbeing Forum really is about separating myself and my personal journey from the cause almost, and like the sort of mission, which is really normalizing different situations and different perspectives on money and helping people to find a sense of financial well-being, rather than just looking at like the kind of bare bones of good money management, which, you know, a lot of people have been doing for a long time, and it just doesn't reach a certain, you know, quite large subsection of people, and having sort of a really honest and sort of emotionally intelligent, judgment-free space for all of those things to be aired. I wanted to create something that wasn't about me, essentially, because, you know, I can talk about my experience, but actually, like, I'm a middle class white woman who happens to have struggled with this, and I don't think it devalues my experience, but I don't want to pretend like that's the only experience of debt and financial difficulty that exists, because it isn't. So probably the next step in the journey will be sort of letting go of that, and my main channel being, you know, very much the same as what it is now, but just under my name, and then having the Financial Wellbeing Forum as well for all of those resources and thought pieces and you know, guides. I really want to make it into something that's sort of like the go-to place for anybody who's struggling with their financial well-being. And then obviously there are like big sort of pipe dream plans, like having a charity arm like Financial Wellbeing Trust, where we can give sort of, you know, grants to people who are really struggling, but that's a long way in the future. I think.
I mean, you're on the cusp as we speak of clearing down the debt that you started this project with. What are your financial ambitions now that you have this changed relationship with money and a different way of working and a different income? Do you think it looks different to what you would have wanted before you started this?
I think my goals have always been quite consistent, actually. And I always say to people, like, it's absolutely fine if they change over the course of the time. But I look back to the kind of long-term goals I posted actually quite early into the journey. And I think because my life otherwise is quite settled, like I'm married with 2 children, I don't really want, like, I live in a city that I really love, don't really want to leave. I'm quite settled in all of that stuff. So, you know, the next goal, and I've been quite open about this as well, the next goal absolutely after we finish clearing the debt is to buy a house. So we rent privately at the moment, and I've talked quite a lot about the challenges that come with that in the UK. You know, it's not the case in a lot of other countries, but tenants are still very much sort of treated as second-class citizens, especially outside of London. I think it's far more normal in London. And, you know, we were forced to move the day after the first lockdown was announced because our landlord just decided to sell. And so we had to sort of, you know, move ourselves and our 2 children at great sort of financial and emotional cost at a really horrible time. And I just don't, if we can possibly afford not to be in that situation, then that has to be my next priority. And so, yeah, but that's very exciting.
We're invested now, Claire. Everybody will be really excited to see that day. And do you feel now at ease with your public profile, your social profile, posting your picture on Instagram, all of those things?
I think I have. Definitely. It's only happened very, very recently though. And there are still people who can like really get under my skin. Generally, I'm way more at ease with it, but I do genuinely believe that I have a fairly steady sense of financial well-being now. Like I'm cool with it all, which means that I can like say stuff like I had £27,500 worth of credit card, overdraft and store card debt. So without like those feelings of sort of shame or like blushing or feeling embarrassed or whatever. Ask me on a different day, the answer would probably be totally different. But today, yes.
Thank you so much for your honesty in this recording, just as it is on your social profile. It's just exactly the same vibe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks so much for having me.
What I take away from that conversation is that honesty will absolutely never go out of style. If you're feeling something or experiencing it, other people will be too. We really are not all so different. And if you just bloody post it, you will find your tribe on social. That you can't go wrong when you're providing value, sharing what you know and have learned with no expectation of getting anything back will work. If you give generously, a community will grow around you, and that brings opportunity. And that it's very possible for your online profile to grow and change. Claire's frugal year is over. Since we recorded her chat, she announced that she's cleared that £27,000 debt, so her account will move on to reflect that, and it's allowed. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to help spread the word about Just Bloody Post It, the thing to do is leave a review about the podcast, algorithms and things. It makes it easier for people to discover it. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Bye.